The chill of the grand ballroom's marble floor seeped through her simple shoes, a cold reminder of a world she no longer belonged to. Just 6 months ago she was Amelia Vance, mistress of a sprawling estate. Tonight she was Amelia Rosewood, a nobody serving champagne at an event hosted by her ex-husband's new fiancée. They cornered her by the crystal fountains, their laughter like shattering glass. "Look at her," the fiancée sneered, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "All that grace, all that poise. And now she has absolutely nothing." Amelia's world shrunk to the sound of their mockery. But what they couldn't see, hidden in the shadows, was a man whose nothing was more than their everything. A man who was about to turn their glittering world upside down. Amelia Rosewood sat on the lumpy mattress of her tiny studio apartment, the city lights of Boston painting in different streaks across the bare walls. The room smelled of old paint and the faint lingering scent of the microwave dinner she'd just finished. It was a smell of survival, a stark contrast to the aroma of jasmine and expensive perfume that had once filled her life. For 12 years she had been Amelia Vance, wife of the charismatic real estate mogul Jonathan Vance. Theirs had been a storybook romance, or so the society pages had claimed. He was the ambitious architect of a property empire, Vance Corp., and she was his elegant, supportive partner. She had poured her soul into his life, sacrificing her own budding career as a historical archivist to manage their homes, host his clients, and cultivate the perfect social image that his business thrived on. She had organized charity galas that raised millions, charmed stubborn investors with her quiet intelligence, and stood by his side, a silent but essential pillar of his success. She thought they were a team. He called her his secret weapon. But weapons, she had learned, can be discarded when a newer, shinier model appears. The end had come with brutal surgical precision. His name was Jonathan Vance, but the man who sat opposite her in their sun-drenched, minimalist living room 6 months ago was a stranger. His words were cold and rehearsed. "It's just not working anymore, Amelia." "What's not working?" she had asked, her heart a frantic bird trapped in her chest. "The business? Are we in trouble?" He'd had the decency to look away, his gaze falling on a new abstract sculpture she hated. "Us, we're not working." He explained it like a business merger gone wrong. Their synergy was gone. He needed new energy. The new energy had a name: Isabella Sterling. She was 24, the daughter of a rival developer with a merciless ambition that mirrored Jonathan's own and a social media following in the millions. She was everything Amelia was not: loud, where Amelia was quiet; flashy, where Amelia was elegant; and brazen, where Amelia was reserved. The divorce was a bloodbath. Jonathan's lawyers, a pack of tailored sharks, had produced a prenuptial agreement Amelia had signed in a haze of love and trust a decade earlier. It was ironclad. She had waived her rights to his business assets, his properties, his fortune. He called it protecting the Vance legacy. She now knew it was just protecting himself. He gave her what he termed a generous settlement, enough to rent this tiny apartment for a year and not much else. He kept the house, the cars, the art collection, and the life they had built. She was left with her maiden name, a few boxes of personal belongings, and a profound, hollow emptiness. Her friends who were really his friends had evaporated. The invitations stopped. The phone calls ceased. It was as if the moment she was no longer Mrs. Vance, she had become invisible. Desperation had led her to take a job with a high-end catering company. It was humbling work, but it paid the bills. She served canapés to the very people who once dined at her table. She refilled the champagne flutes of women wearing gowns she herself had once owned. Each event was a fresh new hell, a reminder of the life that had been stolen from her. Tonight was the worst yet. The annual Children's Heritage Foundation Gala, an event she had personally founded and chaired for 5 consecutive years. Now it was being hosted by Jonathan and his new fiancée, Isabella. The catering company had gotten the contract, and Amelia, needing the money, couldn't refuse the shift. She smoothed down the crisp black uniform, her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, a pale imitation of the woman she used to be. The simple gold locket around her neck, a gift from her late grandmother, felt like the only authentic thing she had left. It held a tiny faded picture of her parents. It was her anchor. As she stepped out into the chilly September evening, heading towards the glittering lights of the grand atrium, where her past and present were set to collide, she took a deep breath. She wasn't Amelia Vance anymore. She was Amelia Rosewood. And tonight she just had to survive. The grand atrium was a cathedral of wealth. Towering glass ceilings revealed a star-dusted sky, while colossal chandeliers dripped diamonds of light onto the polished marble floors. The air buzzed with the murmur of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of glasses and the soft strains of a string quartet. For Amelia, it was a beautiful gilded cage filled with ghosts. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her tray of champagne flutes held steady. She kept her eyes down her face, a neutral mask. A flash of recognition here, a quickly averted gaze there. She saw Mrs. Albright, who had once wept on her shoulder over a family tragedy. Now she pretended not to see Amelia at all. She saw Marcus Thorne, a man whose fledgling business Jonathan had invested in at Amelia's urging. He was now laughing heartily, with Jonathan clapping him on the back. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic prisoner. Every corner held a memory, every face a judgment. This was the stage she had commanded, and now she was merely part of the scenery. She was refilling her tray near the ornate ice sculpture of a swan when she heard the voice that still haunted her dreams. "Well, well, look what we have here." Amelia froze. It was Jonathan. He stood before her immaculate in a Tom Ford tuxedo, a smug smile playing on his lips. Beside him, Isabella Sterling clung to his arm, looking like a predatory bird in a shimmering backless silver gown. Her eyes, sharp and cold, raked over Amelia's simple black uniform. "Jonathan, darling, you didn't tell me the help was so familiar," Isabella said, her voice dripping with saccharine poison. "Amelia was just telling me how happy she is to be part of our special night," Jonathan said smoothly, his eyes glinting with a cruel amusement. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed her subjugation. Amelia clutched her tray, her knuckles white. "I'm just doing my job, Jonathan." "Of course you are," Isabella purred, stepping closer. She took a flute from Amelia's tray, her long manicured fingers brushing against Amelia's. "It must be so hard to go from hosting the party to serving it. Tell me, what does a night like this pay? I'm just so curious what this," she gestured vaguely at Amelia's existence, "is worth." A small circle of onlookers had begun to form, drawn by the scent of drama. Their faces were a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crept up Amelia's neck. "Please," Amelia whispered, her voice tight. "Don't do this here." "Oh, but this is the perfect place." Isabella laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on Amelia's nerves. "It's a testament to Jonathan's good judgment. He always knows how to cut his losses and trade up." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for everyone to hear. "He told me all about you, how you had nothing when he met you, how he gave you everything. And now look at you. Right back where you started, with absolutely nothing." The word "nothing" hung in the air, echoing in the sudden silence. It was a verdict, a final judgment on her life, her worth, her 12 years of devotion. Jonathan just stood there, his smile unwavering, tacitly endorsing every venomous word. Tears pricked at the back of Amelia's eyes, hot and sharp. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she looked directly into Isabella's cold eyes. "Some people's idea of everything is very different from mine," she said, her voice quiet but clear. She turned to walk away, her composure a fragile shield. In her haste, her hand trembled, and a single champagne flute slipped from the tray. It hit the marble floor with a sickening crash, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. For Amelia, the sound was the perfect metaphor for her life. Shattered. Publicly. Irreparably. "Clumsy, too," Isabella sneered. "You see Jonathan utterly replaceable." Amelia didn't look back. She pushed through the gawking onlookers and fled, her cheeks burning, the sound of their laughter chasing her through the grand hall like a pack of wolves. She stumbled out a side door into the cool, dark embrace of the formal gardens, finally letting the tears fall. She had nothing. They were right. She had absolutely nothing left. Damian Sterling despised these events. He saw them not as celebrations of philanthropy, but as peacock displays of ego and status. He attended only out of a reluctant sense of familial duty. His younger half-sister Isabella thrived in this glittering swamp, but Damian found it suffocating. He stood in a shadowed alcove partially concealed by a large potted palm nursing a glass of scotch. From this vantage point he had an unobstructed view of the main floor. He watched the preening and posturing with a detached, analytical gaze. At 42, Damian was the antithesis of the world he moved in. As the sole owner and CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a global technology and investment firm, he was wealthier and more powerful than anyone in this room, yet he carried himself with a quiet, unassuming air that most mistook for aloofness. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored dark suit, no flashy watch, no ostentatious jewelry. His power wasn't something he needed to display. It was an intrinsic part of him, as natural as the steady, thoughtful look in his gray eyes. He had been watching his sister Isabella and her new prize, Jonathan Vance. Damian had done his due diligence on Vance. The man was a shark leveraged to the hilt, all gloss and no substance. His company, Vance Corp., was a house of cards, a fact Damian knew because Sterling Enterprises was in the final silent stages of a hostile takeover of one of Vance's primary lenders. Within a month, Damian would effectively own Jonathan Vance. The thought gave him no pleasure, merely a grim sense of inevitability. Business was business. His gaze shifted as he saw them approach a caterer. He recognized the woman instantly, though he had never met her. Amelia Vance, or Rosewood now. He'd seen her picture in society columns for years, always poised and elegant by her husband's side. He had heard the whispers about the brutal divorce. To see her here in a server's uniform was jarring. He watched the entire horrifying exchange unfold. He saw Isabella's venom, Jonathan's smug cruelty, and the crowd's pathetic voyeuristic fascination. But most of all, he saw Amelia. He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, quickly masked by a formidable wall of dignity. He heard her quiet, powerful retort, "Some people's idea of everything is very different from mine." In that moment, she was the most impressive person in the entire ballroom. She didn't scream or cry or cause a scene. She absorbed the blow with a grace that was more potent than any shouted insult. When the glass shattered, he saw it not as a moment of clumsiness, but as the physical manifestation of her breaking point. He felt a surge of cold fury directed squarely at his sister and her loathsome fiancée. He had long been aware of Isabella's shallow and often cruel nature, but this was a new low. To publicly humiliate a woman who had already lost so much was beyond despicable. As Amelia fled into the gardens, Damian set his scotch down on a nearby table with a decisive click. He moved from the shadows, his expression unreadable. He had no intention of playing the white knight. That wasn't his style. But he also could not let this stand. He walked over to the scene of the crime. Jonathan and Isabella were preening, accepting sympathetic murmurs from their sycophantic friends about the dreadful staff. Damian's arrival cast an immediate chill over the group. "Damian," Isabella said, her smile faltering slightly, "I didn't know you were here." "Evidently," he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. His gray eyes were like chips of granite as they settled on Jonathan Vance. "Vance." He acknowledged him with a curt nod. "Mr. Sterling," Jonathan said, extending a hand. "An honor." Damian ignored the hand. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, then back at Isabella. "That was a disgusting display." Isabella's face tightened. "I have no idea what you're talking about. The help was clumsy and rude." No. Damian corrected, his voice cutting through the chatter. You were cruel, and you, Vance, were complicit. You allowed that woman, your former wife, to be savaged for your own amusement. It was pathetic. The color drained from Jonathan's face. To be called pathetic by Damian Sterling in front of this audience was a social death sentence. Without waiting for a reply, Damian turned and walked purposefully towards the doors leading to the garden. As he passed the spot where Amelia had stood, he noticed something small and metallic on the floor, nearly hidden in the shadow of a table leg. It must have fallen when the glass broke. He bent down and picked it up. It was a simple old-fashioned gold locket warm from her skin. It was clearly not an expensive piece, but it looked well-loved, its surface worn smooth by time and touch. He closed his fist around it. It felt like holding on to the last piece of a shipwreck. He knew with absolute certainty that he had to return it to her. Amelia found a secluded stone bench hidden behind a thicket of white roses, their scent heavy in the cool night air. The music from the gala was a faint, muffled throb a world away. She wrapped her arms around herself, the tears finally subsiding into shuddering breaths. The public humiliation was a raw wound, but beneath it was a deeper ache, the profound loneliness of her new reality. They were right. She had nothing. No home, no security, no husband, no friends. Just a lumpy mattress and a job that required her to serve her own ghosts. She reached for the locket at her throat, her fingers seeking its familiar, comforting shape. It was her one tangible link to a time when she was loved unconditionally. Her fingers met only the fabric of her uniform. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. She frantically searched her collar, her pockets. It was gone. The locket. Her grandmother's locket. The one thing that was truly hers, the one thing Jonathan hadn't been able to take. A fresh wave of despair washed over her. It was too much. The universe was truly kicking her while she was down. I believe this might be yours. The voice was deep and calm, startling her. A tall figure emerged from the shadows of the garden path. He was dressed in a dark suit, his features sharp and intelligent in the moonlight. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held a look of quiet consideration. She didn't recognize him at first. He held out his hand, and resting on his palm was her gold locket. Relief washed over her so intensely it made her dizzy. "Oh," she breathed, reaching for it. "Thank you. I thought it was lost forever." Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and an unexpected warmth traveled up her arm. "It fell inside by the table," he said simply. She looked up at him properly then, and a flicker of recognition sparked. She'd seen him in the business pages. Damian Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises. And with a jolt that went through her like an electric current, she realized he was Isabella Sterling's older half-brother. Her immediate instinct was to recoil. He was one of them. He was part of the family that had just gleefully torn her to shreds. You're Isabella's brother," she stated, her voice flat, the gratitude in her tone instantly replaced by suspicion. He didn't flinch. "I am," he confirmed. "And for what it's worth, what my sister and Mr. Vance did in there was contemptible. I wanted to apologize on my family's behalf, though I know that means very little." Amelia was taken aback. She had expected arrogance or perhaps pity. She had not expected a sincere, direct apology. She looked into his eyes and saw no deceit, only a steady, unwavering honesty. "It wasn't your fault," she said quietly, fastening the locket back around her neck. "Behavior like that is a reflection on everyone associated with it," he countered. "It's a reflection I don't care for." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" She hesitated for a second, then nodded. He sat at the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the distant music and the gentle rustle of leaves. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was surprisingly comfortable. "I saw you run this event 3 years ago," he said, breaking the quiet. "The auction for the pediatric wing." Amelia looked at him in surprise. "You were there." "I was. My company was one of the corporate sponsors. You were formidable. You convinced a room full of venture capitalists to bid against each other for a finger painting. I remember being incredibly impressed. A small, sad smile touched Amelia's lips. It felt like he was talking about a different person. I was good at that, she admitted softly. Connecting people to a cause. It's a rare talent, he said, to see the value in things others overlook. He paused, his gaze thoughtful. Vance is a fool. He didn't just lose a wife, he lost his greatest asset. His words hit her with unexpected force. For months she had been defined by her loss. Jonathan had framed it as him getting rid of a liability. To hear this powerful, serious man reframe it to call her the asset was like a crack of light in a very dark room. She finally looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who seemed as out of place in that glittering ballroom as she did. There was a depth and a stillness to him that she found herself drawn to. "Why are you out here, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice genuine. "Please call me Damian," he said. "And I'm out here because I prefer reality to performance. There's more truth in this garden than in that entire ballroom." He turned his head to look at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "And I wanted to make sure you were all right." For the first time in a very long time, someone had asked if she was all right, and she actually believed they meant it. A single tear she hadn't managed to suppress slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. "I will be," she said, and for the first time she felt it might actually be true. Damian simply nodded. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He offered her his quiet, respectful presence. And in the wreckage of her humiliating night, that unexpected kindness felt more valuable than all the diamonds and champagne in the world. He stayed with her until her shift was over, and when it was time for her to leave, he walked her not to a waiting limousine, but to the bus stop. The days that followed the gala unfolded with a dizzying, surreal speed. Amelia had expected to wake up the next morning feeling the familiar sting of shame. Instead, she woke up feeling intrigued. Damian Sterling had asked for her phone number before she'd gotten on the bus, a request so straightforward and devoid of pretense that she'd given it to him without a second thought. He texted her the next morning. Coffee. It was a simple invitation, but it felt monumental. She met him at a small, independent coffee shop miles away from the glitzy downtown circles they both in different ways were trying to avoid. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. He wore a casual Henley shirt and looked more like a university professor than a billionaire tycoon. They talked for 3 hours. They didn't talk about Jonathan or Isabella or the gala. They talked about books, about history, her passion, and technology, his. She spoke of her dream of one day digitizing fragile historical archives for small museums. He listened with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she hadn't been in over a decade. He spoke of the ethical dilemmas of artificial intelligence and his belief that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a thinker, a builder. One coffee turned into dinner the next night at a quiet Italian restaurant with checkered tablecloths. The night after that, he took her to the Museum of Fine Arts, which was closed to the public. They walked through the silent, echoing halls alone, and she found herself explaining the history of a 17th-century tapestry with a passion she thought had been extinguished. He watched her, his expression a mixture of fascination and something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. It was a whirlwind. Amelia felt as though she was being gently but inexorably swept up in a current she couldn't control. With Damian, she wasn't the ex-wife, the victim, the disgraced socialite. She was Amelia Rosewood, intelligent, witty, and passionate. He was unwrapping the layers of grief and humiliation that had encased her for months and reminding her of the woman who lay beneath. On the 4th day, he invited her to his home. It wasn't the cold, minimalist mansion she had expected. It was a historic brownstone on Beacon Hill, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable worn leather chairs, and the scent of old paper and wood smoke. It was a home, not a showroom. It was there, sitting by a crackling fire with glasses of wine, that the conversation finally turned to the inevitable. "I need to be completely transparent with you, Amelia," he said, his tone serious. He set his wine glass down and gave her his full attention. "My interest in Jonathan Vance is not just personal." Amelia's heart gave a nervous flutter. "What do you mean?" "Sterling Enterprises holds a controlling interest in the bank that underwrites the majority of Vance Corp's commercial debt," he explained calmly. "Vance has over-leveraged his company. His last few projects have been financial disasters masked by clever accounting. In short, he's on the verge of collapse. My board has authorized a complete acquisition of the debt, which in effect means we will be taking control of his company." Amelia stared at him, trying to process the information. "You're taking over Jonathan's company." "It's not personal, it's business," he stated. "But the timing, now that I've met you, has made it complicated. I wanted you to hear it from me." She saw it then, the power he wielded so quietly. He wasn't just going to witness Jonathan's downfall. He was going to be the architect of it. A small, shameful part of her felt a thrill of vindication, but it was quickly overshadowed by the implications. "And Isabella?" she asked softly. "She knows nothing about this," Damian said. "Her relationship with Vance is, I suspect, as transactional as his business dealings. She is attracted to the power she thinks he has." He then looked at her, his gray eyes piercing. "There is another reason I am telling you this. When this happens, and it will happen within the next week, it will be explosive. Vance will not go quietly. My sister will be volatile. It will be a storm, Amelia. A very public one." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His was warm and strong. "I don't want you to be caught in that storm by surprise." He continued, his voice dropping slightly. "I want you to be standing next to me. With me." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This was moving so fast. A week ago she was serving champagne and being laughed at for having nothing. Now this incredible man was essentially offering her everything. But it wasn't the money or the power that moved her. It was the "with me." The partnership. The idea of standing beside someone, not behind them. "Damian, it's only been a few days," she whispered, her mind reeling. "I know what I see, Amelia," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I see a woman of immense strength, grace, and intelligence who has been treated appallingly. I see a partner. I see my future. The velocity doesn't frighten me because the direction is clear." He paused, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "Marry me, Amelia." The question hung in the air, more real and more terrifying and more wonderful than anything she had ever imagined. It was insane. It was madness. It was the most logical thing in the world. Saying yes was a leap of faith, a jump into a future she couldn't possibly predict. But saying no felt like turning her back on the first glimmer of real happiness she'd seen in years. She thought of Jonathan's smug face, of Isabella's cruel laughter, of the word nothing echoing in the grand ballroom. And then she looked at Damian, a man who saw her as his greatest asset. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, I will." The announcement for the press conference was deliberately vague. Sterling Enterprises to announce major strategic acquisition and new leadership initiative. The business world was buzzing. Speculation was rampant. Was Damian Sterling buying a European tech firm? Launching a new space division? No one predicted the truth. The conference was held in the glass and steel media auditorium at the Sterling Tower. It was packed. Reporters from every major financial news outlet were present, cameras flashing, a low hum of anticipation filling the room. In the front row, seated in a place of honor, were Isabella Sterling and Jonathan Vance. Isabella was beaming, having convinced herself and Jonathan that this new leadership initiative was Damian's way of finally bringing her and her brilliant fiancé into the Sterling fold. She wore a vibrant red dress, a triumphant splash of color in a sea of corporate gray. Jonathan sat beside her, looking smug and confident, already picturing his name on a new office door. He'd even prepared a few remarks just in case Damian called him to the stage. Amelia and Damian watched from a private viewing room backstage. Amelia's hands were ice cold. She was wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress Damian had insisted on buying for her. It was the first new piece of clothing she'd owned in over a year. "Are you ready?" Damian asked, his hand finding hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "I feel like I'm about to step off a cliff," she admitted, her heart pounding. "We're stepping off it together," he said, giving her hand a squeeze. "And we'll fly." He walked onto the stage to a volley of camera flashes. He moved to the podium with his customary calm, projecting an aura of absolute control. "Good morning," he began, his voice filling the auditorium. "Thank you for coming. I have 2 significant announcements to make today." He clicked a remote and the screen behind him lit up with the Vance Corp logo. A gasp went through the room. In the front row, Jonathan Vance sat up straighter, a look of utter confusion on his face. "As of 8 a.m. this morning," Damian announced, his voice cool and precise, "Sterling Enterprises completed a full acquisition of the outstanding debt and assets of the Vance Corporation. Effective immediately, Sterling now holds a 100% controlling interest." The room erupted. Shouts, questions, the frantic clicking of keyboards. It was a bombshell. Jonathan Vance went pale, the color draining from his face as if he'd been struck. He looked at Isabella, who was staring at the stage, her mouth agape in disbelief. This wasn't happening. "Mr. Vance will be staying on for a transitional period," Damian continued, his eyes briefly flicking to the front row. "Reporting to our new restructuring committee. A full audit of all previous and ongoing projects will commence this afternoon." The unspoken threat was clear. Jonathan was no longer a CEO. He was a subordinate, his empire now a mere department in Damian's. His fate was entirely in Damian's hands. The reporters were in a frenzy. But Damian held up a hand for silence. "That was my first announcement," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The second is more personal, but it speaks to the future and the new direction of our company's core values." He paused, letting the suspense build. His gaze swept the room before landing on the wings of the stage. For too long, the world has measured value in dollars and cents, in assets and liabilities. We forget that the greatest assets are not found on a balance sheet. They are people of integrity, resilience, and vision. It is with this in mind that I am restructuring our most important asset, my own life. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his usually serious features. "I would like you all to meet the new cornerstone of my life and the future head of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation, my fiancée, Ms. Amelia Rosewood." He turned and extended his hand towards the stage entrance. Time seemed to slow down. Amelia took a deep breath and walked out into the blinding lights. The entire auditorium fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Then 1,000 cameras flashed at once, a deafening explosion of light and sound. She walked gracefully to Damian's side. He took her hand and lifted it to his lips, a gesture of profound tenderness and respect that was broadcast on screens around the world. In the front row, Isabella Sterling's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and disbelief. This was impossible. The clumsy waitress, the pathetic ex-wife, standing there beside her brother, the most powerful man she knew. But it was Jonathan's reaction that was the most telling. He stared at Amelia not with anger, but with a dawning, horrifying realization. He hadn't just lost his company. He had lost the one person who had ever truly believed in him. He had thrown away his greatest asset for a cheap imitation. He saw her now, not as the mousy wife he had discarded, but as the poised, beautiful woman standing beside a man who truly understood her worth. The woman who had just in one graceful step ascended to a world he could now only dream of touching. He had laughed at her for having nothing. And in that moment, in the glare of 1,000 flashing lights, Jonathan Vance finally understood that it was he who was truly empty. The aftermath of the press conference was a seismic event. The story was everywhere. Billionaire Sterling announces hostile takeover and surprise engagement to rival's ex-wife. The narrative was irresistible, a tale of love, revenge, and a corporate coup all rolled into one. The image of Damian kissing Amelia's hand was on the front page of every newspaper and the top of every newsfeed. Jonathan and Isabella became the subjects of intense public ridicule. Their cruelty at the gala, which had been witnessed by dozens, was now recounted in gossipy detail in every society column. They were no longer the power couple. They were a cautionary tale, the villains in a real-life Cinderella story. The day after the announcement, Jonathan, stripped of all authority and dignity, tried to confront Amelia. He waited for her outside Damian's brownstone, his face haggard, his usual arrogance replaced by a desperate, pleading look. "Amelia, we need to talk," he said, stepping in front of her as she went to get into a waiting car. "There's nothing to talk about, Jonathan," she said, her voice calm and steady. She felt no anger, only a distant pity. "You can't do this," he begged, his voice cracking. "This is all a game to him, a way to get at me. He's using you. I know you, Amelia. This isn't you. We had 12 years. That meant something." She looked at him, then, truly seeing the man before her for the first time without the filter of love or loyalty. She saw a weak man, a man who only valued things when they were gone. "You're right, Jonathan. It did mean something," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It meant I gave you the best years of my life, my support, my loyalty. And in return, you and your fiancée laughed at me while I served you drinks. Damian isn't using me, he's valuing me. It's a concept you've never understood." She got into the car without a backward glance, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk, a king with no kingdom. Isabella's confrontation with Damian was far more explosive. She stormed into his office, her face a thunderous mask of rage. "How could you?" she shrieked, throwing a newspaper down on his desk. "You humiliated me. You humiliated our family with her. That pathetic little nobody." Damian didn't even look up from the report he was reading. "I suggest you lower your voice, Isabella. This is a place of business. This is about you destroying my life." Finally, he looked up, his gray eyes as cold as a winter storm. "Your life? You mean your association with a fraudulent businessman who was on the brink of insolvency. I did you a favor. As for Amelia, you will speak of her with respect. She has more character in her little finger than you and Vance have in your entire bodies. She is going to be my wife. She is going to be a part of this family. And if you have a problem with that, then you can consider your access to the Sterling Family Trust under severe review." The threat hit its mark. Isabella's rage sputtered out, replaced by a terrified understanding of her own precarious position. She had hitched her wagon to Jonathan's falling star, and now her brother was threatening to cut her lifeline. She left his office not with a bang, but with a whimper. In the weeks that followed, Amelia's new life began to take shape. Damian was true to his word. He put her in charge of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation, an organization with a multi-billion-dollar endowment. Her first project was the one she had spoken of in the coffee shop, a large-scale initiative to fund the digitization of historical archives for underfunded museums and libraries across the country. Her passion became her profession. She was no longer just a partner. She was a powerhouse in her own right, lauded for her vision and intelligence. She and Damian were married not in a lavish society wedding, but in a quiet, private ceremony at the Boston Public Library, surrounded by the books and history they both loved. Their vows were not about wealth or status, but about partnership, respect, and building a life of shared purpose. One evening months later, Amelia was looking out the window of their brownstone, watching the snow fall gently on the quiet street. Damian came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "I was thinking about the gala," she admitted. "About Isabella's words. You have absolutely nothing." "And?" he prompted. She turned in his arms to face him, a gentle smile on her lips. "She was wrong. I had everything that mattered. I just hadn't realized it yet. I had my strength. I had my dignity. And I had the capacity to love again. That wasn't nothing. That was the foundation for everything. He kissed her a long, slow kiss, filled with the quiet comfort of a love that was real and true. She had once served champagne in a world of illusion, but now she was living a life of profound substance. Her journey hadn't been about going from rags to riches. It had been about discovering that her true wealth was never something that could be taken from her in the first place. 1 year later, the Grand Atrium was once again filled to capacity for the annual Children's Heritage Foundation Gala. The chandeliers still dripped light, the marble still gleamed, and the air still buzzed with the conversations of Boston's elite. But everything was different. The gaudy, ostentatious decorations of the previous year were gone. In their place were elegant arrangements of wildflowers and tasteful, understated lighting. On a large screen, instead of a looping video of the hosts, a quiet, powerful documentary played, showcasing the children and historians who had benefited from the Foundation's new initiatives. The entire atmosphere had shifted from a spectacle of wealth to a celebration of purpose. At the center of it all was Amelia Rosewood Sterling. She moved through the room not as a server or a ghost, but as the chairwoman of the Foundation and the evening's host. She wore a deep emerald gown that shimmered with every step, but her true radiance came from the quiet confidence that now settled on her as comfortably as a second skin. People didn't just greet her. They sought her out, eager to speak with her about the Foundation's work, to praise her vision, to be seen with a woman who had become one of the city's most respected philanthropic leaders. Damian was never far from her side, his pride in her a palpable presence. He watched her engage with a senator, debate the merits of a new educational program with a university president, and crouch down to speak with a young girl who was a recipient of one of their scholarships. He saw her not as a trophy he had won, but as a partner who challenged and inspired him. "She's transformed it," a woman whispered to her friend, gesturing around the room. "Last year this event felt so garish. This year it feels important." "It's because Amelia actually cares," her friend replied. "She's the real deal. Did you hear what happened to Vance and Isabella Sterling?" The first woman leaned in closer, hungry for the gossip. "I heard he lost everything." "Worse," the friend said with a grim satisfaction. "He has to work." The Sterling audit uncovered years of financial mismanagement. He wasn't just bought out, he was disgraced. He tried to start a small consulting firm, but no one would touch him. His name is poison. I heard he's living in a cramped apartment out in the suburbs, drowning in legal fees. And the sister, Isabella. Oh, that was a spectacular flameout. After Damian publicly backed Amelia, Isabella's social stock plummeted. She tried to rebrand herself as a lifestyle influencer, but her comments section was flooded with people calling her out for what she did to Amelia. Damian froze her trust fund for 6 months to encourage a period of reflection. Last I heard, she moved to Los Angeles to try and become an actress, but she's mostly just posting bitter screeds on social media to a dwindling audience. Their gossip was cut short as Amelia stepped onto the stage, a warm smile on her face. A hush fell over the crowd. "Good evening." Amelia began, her voice clear and resonant. "A year ago I stood in this very room feeling utterly lost. Some of you here tonight witnessed what was for me a moment of profound despair. A wave of uncomfortable recognition rippled through the audience. It was a bold, unexpected opening. I'm not telling you this to elicit sympathy." She continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm telling you this because it was in that moment of perceived nothingness that I began to understand what everything truly is. True value isn't in what you own or who you know. It's not in the price of your gown or the size of your home. It's in your resilience. It's in the dignity you refuse to surrender. And most importantly, it's in what you choose to build when all the old structures have been torn down." She spoke about the Foundation's work, about preserving the stories of the past to empower the children of the future. She spoke with a passion that was captivating. This wasn't a speech written by a PR team. This was a creed she was living. "We are all the curators of our own lives." She concluded, her eyes finding Damian's in the crowd. We choose what to preserve, what to value, and what legacy to leave behind. Tonight, thanks to your generosity, we are choosing to build a legacy of hope. Thank you." The room erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a genuine, heartfelt acknowledgement of her journey and her triumph. Miles away in a sparsely furnished apartment that smelled of stale coffee, Jonathan Vance watched the gala on a live stream on his laptop. He saw Amelia at the podium, poised powerful and beautiful in a way he had never appreciated. He heard her words about building from nothing, and they landed like physical blows. He had torn down their life together, and from the rubble she had built an empire of purpose while he was left with nothing but the dust. He closed the laptop, the screen going dark, plunging him into the quiet emptiness of a life defined by a single catastrophic miscalculation. Later that evening, back in the warmth of their library, Amelia stood by the fire holding a glass of champagne. Damian came and stood beside her, their reflections dancing in the dark window pane. "You were magnificent tonight," he said softly. "We were," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "This is a partnership." "Always," he agreed. She looked around the room at the books filled with stories of the past, at the man who was her future, and at the quiet, contented peace that filled her own heart. She had once been laughed at for having nothing. But now, holding the hand of the man she loved doing work that filled her soul, she understood with perfect clarity that she finally had it all. And it was a wealth that no one could ever take away. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth is never defined by our circumstances, our bank accounts, or the cruel words of others. It's forged in our resilience, our integrity, and our ability to hold on to our dignity when the world tries to strip it away. She was laughed at for having nothing, but she possessed the inner wealth that money can never buy. From the depths of public humiliation to the heights of true love and purpose, she proved that the greatest comebacks are not about revenge, but about rediscovering and reclaiming your own value. If Amelia's story of triumph resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of the human spirit to rise from the ashes, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who might need to hear this message, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and empower. Thank you for listening.